Here we're going to start with riveting the trigger guard, and for this I'm using the AK Builder Trigger Guard riveting jig right here. And it basically just comes with a steel block, this thing that's used to rivet the pins down, and this is what holds the trigger guard in place while you're riveting everything down. So not a whole lot here, but everything needs to be just right. And one thing I had to do for my kit is I would definitely recommend having a Dremel, and I really like this Dremel kit here. It's got everything you need to build an AK. Anything you need to sand down the rails, or not the rails, but the mag area where the holds in the mags. Sand that down if you need to. Anything like, for right here, in order for me to make this work, my mag release right here is super wide, and typically this kind of thing just slides in like this, but since my mag release is so big, it sticks out. And it only doesn't stick out if you pull this back, but it's springed. So it's a hassle if you don't wedge something in there. So I took this nut right here and I used my Dremel and I ground it down. And then what I did is I just wedged it in here to where it's below this line right here. So it'll still be out of the way. We just you pull this mag release back, and let's see. It's not hard to get in here. There we go. Now you can see that nut is below this line here, and this is where it's going to be resting down. So now for mine, I can slide it in like it's supposed to, and now it's not getting caught up on anything. See, this mag's sticking out and everything's laying down like it's supposed to. Then also, if you have a receiver like mine, see, I finished this 80% receiver, but mine already had the center the center support in here, and then these rails welded in. And when you do that, your block that comes with the riveting jig won't fit in there properly the way it is, because it's running into the rail area basically. And so what I had to do with my Dremel is I had to shorten this block so it'll fit in here. That's not the one I used. Oh wait, yeah, it is. Yeah, so it'll fit in here like this. It needs to be able to go all the way down to these 4 pinholes here, 4 rivets. See? But before it wouldn't go all the way down. And that's another thing you have to do. So that's why it's best to have a Dremel. Dremel is very handy. So I highly recommend getting a Dremel before even starting this build, really. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to set up this trigger guard jig here. And if you can see this hole, this for the rear rivet here, you want to put that, it favors to one side. So you want to put this edge toward this center pocket here. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is you want to take your receiver and pre-fit the trigger guard on here with your rivets here. And what you use are, you use 4 standard small rivets for here, for the front of the trigger guard. And then for this rear one, there's one that's super short, and you want to use that for the rear. And one thing I recommend to do too is buy extra AK Builder rivet sets, because if this is your first time, you're probably gonna mess up a rivet or two. And so it's always good to have extra rivets handy, just in case. So you want to make sure here that when you're pre-putting your trigger guard on, that you don't forget this safety selector stop because most AKs parts kits will have this. Some don't, but most will. One of my AKs that I bought does not have one of these, and it doesn't need one, but mine in this case does, and the first one I built does too. So you want to make sure to put that on first before pre-putting this trigger guard on here. Okay, so we're gonna put that on there, and then I'm gonna sit this on here. You want to take your pins. Okay, so now I'm gonna sit this up here like this, and I'm gonna sit this on top. This is probably the easiest way to do this. This part's gonna have to be slid in though, just like that. Okay. Then what you do is hold it together as you flip it over. Just like that. Now, you're gonna take your, I'll show you what's going on here. Now you're gonna take this steel block and put it in here. You're gonna have to go above this rear rivet. And I wanna do these 4 first here. These are gonna require more pressure and just a little more work than that single one in the back. Okay, so once you get your steel block in there over those 4 rivets, what I do is I favor it a little to this left side here. And the reason why is because you want this block here they're gonna be putting, you're gonna be pressing down on with pressure. You're still gonna want it on this steel block, but you don't want the plate so far over to where your steel block is not, is way too far off center of all the rivets. So I just kind of find the middle ground here, and I just make sure I'm right on the edge of this left side. And that way I'm doing the best I can. And remember, you can see in this block here, it's got this cutout to go over that center support. So that's the whole purpose of all that. Okay, so now before we start here, I just like to make sure all the rivets are definitely in place properly. None of them are sticking out. And that I like to get everything centered. Make sure I'm on that steel plate there. Okay. And now we can set these rivets. And what you want to make sure to do is you want to keep a little bit of pressure down on the receiver just to make sure you don't have any gaps here, when you're setting these rivets. Okay, so I'm gonna get a little bit of pressure on this first. I like to just keep everything centered, make sure I'm level. Once you get pressure on here, then you can keep a little pressure on the receiver. Basically, what you want to do when you're using a 12-ton shop press is once you keep cranking this lever here, it'll eventually get to the point to where it feels like you're doing way too much pressure, and most of the time, that's when you're done. But this rear rivet is going to require less pressure. But for these front ones, it's going to be setting a bunch of pressure. So you just keep going basically until it feels like you're doing way too much pressure, and then you're most likely done. And also too, wear safety glasses. All right. Now let's check this. See, these are in here pretty good. So you can see those rivets down in there. They should look something like that. They're not going to be totally flattened out unless you're using a 20-ton press, because the 12-ton just doesn't have that kind of force. But this is all you need. As long as they're, you know, as long as they're wider than the holes by a decent amount, the rivets, then you're done. Okay, so as long as they look like something like that. Now we're going to move on to this rear rivet, and I'm not going to do near as much force because there's 4 times as, you know, less rivets here. Just 1 rivet instead of 4. So way less force. Okay, now that we got these front rivets pressed, we're going to slide this steel block over this rear rivet here. Okay, center it up. Then make sure you're still supported down low. Then you're going to take this block and you're actually going to flip it over. That way you get full force. You want full force down on that rivet. So we're going to center up this block on the rivet. Just like that. And we're going to pump this down. And you want to, once again, you want to hold this receiver down, just a little bit of tension. I wouldn't put your hand here, but put it over here, you know, just give a little bit of tension. Making sure I'm level. I like to make sure my press is level. Okay. Now you can get your handles a little bit out of the way. You just want to keep a little bit of pressure down. And this one you're doing less pressure. It's way easier. I'm going to check it right now just to make sure I didn't go too far. You don't want to go too far and pancake it down too much. So I'm just going to check. That's good right there. You don't want to crank this down like the other one. There's less pressure on this one. You know, some people say just press them down to where it's just enough to cover the rivet holes. But I like to press them down a little farther. It just makes me feel better knowing that there's more, you know, they're spread out a little more and they're grabbing more area. You know, as long as the rivets are pressed down enough to where they're bigger than the holes, it shouldn't matter. So, but you can see all 5 rivets pressed down good. This trigger guard's not going anywhere.